July 2023 may go down as the most challenging month in the history of Northwestern University and, of course, the Northwestern Wildcats football program. But with those great challenges come great opportunities to prove everybody wrong in 2023.
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
A little bit of a disclaimer here. I recorded this Northwestern Wildcats season preview before all this went down, right? A lot like this season preview is a lot like the Northwestern football offseason has been pre-Pat Fitzgerald firing, pre-hazing allegations, and post-Pat Fitzgerald firing and post-hazing allegations within this program. So when we get to the on the field, the offense, the defense, that part was recorded in late June. And not much has changed, right? We know players can still enter the transfer portal, but a lot of the existing players, we've seen recruits, some higher level recruits that Northwestern has brought in. We've seen recruits decommit, but we really haven't seen a lot of players of significance and experience that are expected to play a big part in this 2023 team. We haven't seen a lot of those players enter in the transfer portal. So that part of the season preview that was recorded in late June still stands here today for this season preview. But I want to get into the positives because there's been so much negative surrounding Northwestern football. Okay, there's been so many people have said so many different things about how down in the dumps that Northwestern is. But with all of these challenges comes immense opportunity. Everybody out there, maybe including me, everybody out there thinks Northwestern is going to go 2-10. Maybe they're going to go 1-11 again. Maybe they won't win a single game in 2023. All these players on this roster will have maybe the biggest chip in the history of chips on shoulders that has ever been had in sports history, because nobody thinks that they're going to do anything. So many opportunities exist for these players to prove a lot of people wrong out there. No opportunity may be greater in Evanston, Illinois than the one that David Braun has. He's the head coach. He is a Big Ten head coach, and he's never coached in FBS prior to this season. So there's going to be a lot of adjustments for this entire team, kind of going through everything that they went through in the month of July. And David Braun, man, he has been going through a lot, okay? From being an FCS coordinator, now given one of the best FCS coordinators in the country the last few years, to becoming a Big Ten head coach. There's something from jumping from the FCS to maybe the Sun Belt, or jumping from the FCS to maybe Conference USA. But jumping from FCS, a coordinator, to a head coach in a Power 2 conference is as big of a jump as you're going to see in the coaching profession. But I will say this about David Braun. From things that I've heard, from things that I've read, from things that I've seen, David Braun is a rising star in the head coaching profession. David Braun, they want, as much as Northwestern is trying to distance themselves from Pat Fitzgerald, they would love to have kind of an on-field, between the lines type of scenario that happened with Pat Fitzgerald. Of course, Pat took over in the mid-2000s. When Randy Walker passed away, he was the defensive coordinator at Northwestern, a young, defensive-minded head coach, promoted, became a rising star, and of course what he was able to do, winning more games than he had business ever winning in Evanston, Illinois. I think everybody's hoping that David Braun can be that kind of guy. Defensive-minded, young guy, rising star in this profession. What can he get out of this football team? Could this be a blessing in disguise for the football program that wears purple in Evanston, Illinois? I believe right now he's the right guy to lead this program. And when we talk about positives, right, when we advance past and we want to look beyond the negative that's been so prevalent throughout the months of July, when we focus on the positive, I really like David Braun as the interim head coach of this team. There is a great opportunity for him to be the permanent head coach. I really believe that. Now, I think part of that kind of goes into maybe Northwestern isn't the most attractive job right now, but I believe if David Braun can do a good job, pull a few upsets, maybe win 4 games, maybe win 5 games this year, this Northwestern administration if they're still there at the time, or maybe it's a new administration, they might see enough for David Braun to be named the permanent head coach. Now, as I said earlier in this introduction, I recorded a Northwestern Wildcats season preview before. Offense and defense, nobody's really entered the transfer portal. Significant players, although they still have the opportunity to, nobody really has entered the transfer portal. We've seen some decommitments on the recruiting side. We've seen some younger players kind of leave their commitments from the Northwestern football program, but no one of significance. Some of these upperclassmen that are going to really make a big impact for Northwestern this season. We really haven't seen those types of players leave Evanston, Illinois as of yet. So I'm going to throw it to the past. Here's what I had to say about Northwestern football here in 2023. So we're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball. They've lost two big key performers from last year. How about Cameron Mitchell, a corner, two-time honorable mention, all Big Ten corner, 52 tackles, 9 passes defended last season. He led the Wildcats in that area as well. You also lose Eddie Tamiwa, Adibare, defensive end, 9 tackles for loss. He was second on the team, led the team in sacks with 5 sacks. He was drafted in the 4th round by the Colts, a two-time All Big Ten player. He was 3rd team All Big Ten. In 2022, you're losing a big-time presence, a disruptor in the backfield. I think he's going to do some good things in the NFL. But despite those 2 losses, there's a solid group coming back for Northwestern. There's some potential. There's some turnaround potential with all the players that they have coming back. There's a lot of experience coming back, and you got to start smack dab right in the middle of that defense. Bryce Gallagher and Alexander Mueller. That's as good of a linebacker tandem, I think, as you're going to find in the Big Ten this season. These are 2 guys that have really performed well, especially last season. Bryce Gallagher going back a little bit further than that. When you look at Bryce Gallagher, 89 tackles in 2021. He had 100 tackles last season, 5 tackles for loss this season. He's been a standout on a lackluster defense. I think he gets overlooked in Big Ten, maybe national circles because of this. When you have a defense that statistically is as bad as Northwestern has done, of course you're going to overlook some guys. But Bryce Gallagher has been a bright spot, I think, on a defense that has underperformed the last couple of seasons for one reason or another. Now, Alexander Mueller took a big jump, right? He only recorded 19 tackles in his sophomore season in 2021, but in 2022 he had 87 tackles, led the team in tackles for a loss 10.5, 2.5 sacks and 2 interceptions. He's an intense guy. His engine never stops running. So you build around these 2 guys in the middle of your linebacking group. I really like Rod Hurd. He played the star position in the 4-2-5 scheme at Northwestern, kind of a safety outside linebacker type. Started all 12 games last season, 67 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. Very interesting where he's going to go. Not sure what the scheme is going to be. Not sure what if there's going to be a scheme change, if they go to a more traditional, say a 3-4, 4-3 type of setting. For Northwestern, where is he going to end up? Is he going to end up at safety? I'm not sure if he's big enough at linebacker. Very interesting to see where Rod Hurd goes, but he can definitely make some things happen. Jeremiah Lewis started all 12 games at safety last year, 70 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and 4 passes defended. How about Coco Azima? Was injured early in the season, missed a lot of the season, but it's big to have him back at safety in that secondary. In 2021, he was 4th on the team in tackles with 51. I think that's going to be big. I think that was a big loss for them the last couple of seasons. Now, someone in the secondary may have to shift to corner because you really got Jeremiah Lewis as a safety, Coco Azima as a safety, Rod Hurd could be a safety. You got to shift to corner. Garnett Hollis is probably going to be at one of those corners as well. So someone's going to have to make that change, it looks like, right, in order to fill up all 4 spots over there in that secondary. When you kind of look forward to the other parts of the defense, the defensive line, this is an area on the D-line where I think you're going to see more transfers really come into play. But Sean McLaughlin started all 12 games last season, 30 tackles, 4 tackles for loss. You look at Najee Story and Aiden Hubbard, both started 3 games for the Wildcats last season. Here's where I think things could get really fun. Transfer Richie Haggerty from Southern Illinois. 6'3". He was 255 on the SIU website. He's 230 on the On3 site. I'll get to why that matters here in just a little bit. But first team All-Missouri Valley at Southern Illinois. He led SIU in sacks, 6.5 sacks last season, 9 tackles for loss. Led them both. I think I really watched this guy on film, and I mentioned intense. I mentioned about the motor keep on running when I talked about Alexander Mueller. I see the same thing, with Richie Haggerty. I think he could really come in, and I think he could really be an impact player, and I think he could really kind of replace what Northwestern is losing on the pass rush. Really interested to see what he can do on this defensive line. You look at Matthew Lawson and Reginald Pearson as well, some transfers that could compete and add depth to this defensive line. When you look at this defensive as a whole, I think it's really up to David Braun, because I think there's solid players in this group, which I think is crazy because of statistically how bad this Northwestern defense was the last few years. But I think there's potential, especially at the linebacker spot. Right, we look at Gallagher and we look at Mueller. You look at Haggerty coming in. You look at the experience that's coming back in the secondary. There's a lot of potential for this Northwestern defense to really take a jump forward, especially under a new scheme and especially under a new coordinator. Let's shift to the offensive side of the football. They are losing 3 huge parts to their offense. On offense, that just wasn't very good. It just wasn't very good. Right, you start with Evan Hull. Evan Hull came in 913 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, 546 yards receiving. Second on the team, a running back. 2 touchdowns receiving. Honorable mention, all Big Ten, drafted in the 5th round. Evan Hull was basically their offense. He carried it on his shoulder, put the team on his back. Kind of a deal. There was Malik Washington. He entered the transfer portal. He's gone. 694 yards and a touchdown receiving last season. Was really their only decent threat outside on the perimeter in terms of a pass-catching threat. How about Peter Skoronski? Man, when you talk about offensive line, you talk about someone you can really rely on at tackle. Peter Skoronski, of course, was that guy. First-team All-American. He was the first ever unanimous first-team All-American in Northwestern history. Big Ten Lineman of the Year. It's the first time that's ever happened in the history of this program. Drafted 11th overall by the Tennessee Titans. We just know he paved the way to a 1,000-yard season a couple of years ago for Evan Hull. He was such a great bookend player on this offensive line for Northwestern. Replacing him, I'll get to this a little bit later, not a ton of experience back on that Northwestern offensive line, so that's going to be a question mark. Losing a guy like Peter Skoronski, one of the best to ever do it at Northwestern, no question about that. Now, when you look at an offense, you got to start at quarterback, and Northwestern had absolutely nothing at quarterback, right? It started off promising. Ryan Helinski looked pretty good against Nebraska that first game, but maybe that was more about the opponent than anything, right, in that first game over there in Ireland. Like you threw in Ryan Helinski, Brendan Sullivan, Cole Freeman, the engineering student, just everybody. They give everybody a chance at quarterback last season. It just didn't pan out. When you don't have quarterback play, everything on the offense really takes a dip, really takes a deep dive, so to speak. So the number one priority they had to do, you had to go out and get a quarterback. And the transfer portal is the place to do that. They got their hands on Ben Bryant. He provides some talent, some stability that you can build off of at the quarterback position. The last 2 seasons, 2021 played at Eastern Michigan, 2022 played at Cincinnati, put up some solid numbers. Okay, a combined over 5,800 yards, 35 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, a solid 65% completion rate with the Eagles and the Bearcats. You know, he's a 6th-year guy. He's been around since 2018. He started in Cincinnati, transferred to Eastern Michigan, transferred to Cincinnati, had a COVID year in there, had a redshirt year in there. Somehow, some way, he still gets to play college football this year. Don't ask me. It's just how the system works. Okay, so have seen a lot of football, seen a lot of coverages, seen a lot of secondaries. That can only be a benefit. I think he's accurate. I think he provides something that Northwestern definitely didn't have a year ago and is a significant upgrade at the quarterback position alone. When you look at piggybacking off of Ben Bryant, helping Ben Bryant Double B out a little bit, it's got to be the run game. Cam Porter, he was the guy that really Northwestern leaned on in that 2020 season when they won the Big Ten West. 81 carries, 333 yards, and 5 touchdowns in 7 games. for the Wildcats in 2020. 2022, he had 87 carries, 286 yards, and 2 touchdowns, of course, behind Evan Holt. But he's got to be a rugged, he's got to be a dependable back. And I believe that this can happen. I believe that can happen. Of course, he was injured during 2021, so he's got to be you got to be able to rely on him as an every down type of back. I think the production of Cam Porter is going to be big in terms of maybe taking some of the pressure, having more of a balanced offense with Ben Bryant over there at quarterback. I think this Northwestern pass game will be a little bit better this year, but you got to try to maintain that run game that you were able to have under Evan Hull. Got to be rugged, got to be dependable. You won't have a great tackle in Peter Skoronski to run behind. So this offensive line has got to be better. You got to help Cam Porter out a little bit. Anthony Tyus and others will be asked to probably provide depth in the run game as well. Now you need to reload. You lost Malik Washington to the portal. And once again, you lose a guy, you bring in some guys, and that's what they did on the outside at wide receiver. A.J. Henning, that should be a familiar name to Big Ten fans, and Cam Johnson. When you talk a look at A.J. Henning, he's got speed, he's got explosiveness, and no question about that. Big playability. But he's not your prototypical number one guy. I think he's going to be used in a variety of ways, very versatile in different formations across this offense. Running game, sweeps, reverses, zone plays, screen game, return game. He's going to be a jack of all trades, I think, across this Northwestern offense, and then special teams when you go to the return game, obviously. He has the speed and the explosiveness that is desperately needed at Northwestern. I'm so curious to see how this offense really injects him into their game plan, because I think he can be very dangerous in many different ways. He can really keep an eye on with his stature, and then with his ability, he can be really hard to keep track of in an offense. I'd really like to see Northwestern really take advantage of that skill set. How about Cam Johnson, a transfer from Arizona State? He was a 4-star recruit when he committed originally to Vanderbilt, and then he played at Arizona State. Had good productive seasons in the SEC in 2020 and 2021. In 2020, 56 catches, 545 yards and 3 touchdowns. 2021, 34 catches, 327 and 4 touchdowns. Things didn't really click last year on multiple fronts for the Sun Devils, but Cam Johnson was one of them. But you bring in Cam Johnson, you bring in A.J. Henning. I think those are 2 solid transfers that you can really start with. I see A.J. Henning maybe playing a little bit more in the slot. Maybe you can put Cam Johnson at an X, and then you bring back Bryce Kurtz, a couple of decent tight ends, Marshall Lang and Thomas Gordon, that are going to look to be complements. Kurtz had 19 catches, 212 yards last season. Lang, 15 catches, 192. Gordon, 12 catches and 162. But one huge question I have with this offense, what's going to happen to this offensive line? According to my research that I was able to find, one career combined start of the returning offensive lineman. It was Caleb Tiernan versus Southern Illinois last season. So not a ton of experience, even though I think there are 3 seniors on this offensive line coming back. This is a big question mark. You knew what you were going to get out of a guy like Peter Skoronski, but now this is a big question mark, and this has been a solid group over the years at Northwestern, and this is a group that needs to be better. If you have Ben Bryant running for his life and Cam Porter doesn't have holes to run through, it could be another long year offensively for Northwestern. Watch out for true freshman Jordan Knox, 6'3", 310, looking to play in the interior of the offensive line. 4-star top 200 guy in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. So maybe he could make an impact right away to really help out this offensive line. That offense, that O-line is such a big key to the success of Northwestern football this season. Let's take a peek at the schedule and see how things could shake out this year for the Northwestern Wildcats. Man, I hate to say must win right off the top, but that game against Rutgers really feels like if you want to make some big-time improvements in the win column, that Rutgers game is very important. It's very important for the Scarlet Knights as well. Duke, not going to be easy on the road. That was a much-improved team last year. Northwestern, here's the deal. If Northwestern wants to put a few wins together, you got to just catch teams on a sleepy Saturday early afternoon in Evanston. Ohio State almost fell into that trap last season when it was really windy over there in Evanston. But I'm looking at you, Maryland. I'm looking at you, Iowa. And I'm looking at you, Purdue. Don't fall into the trap that is those noon games in Evanston at Ryan Field for the Northwestern Wildcats. Don't fall into it, and you come in off of travel, you're a little bit sleepy, it's early, all of a sudden Northwestern's up by a score, they force a turnover. We've seen these games before. I grew up in Wisconsin. Okay, I watched the Badgers many times fall into this type of trap. I should say a couple of times, maybe not too many times, but a couple of times Wisconsin and others have fallen into this trap. I think there's players on defense. There's a lot returning on defense. They've brought in some decent players on the offensive side of the ball that I think Northwestern can work with. It's just in a tough, especially the Big Ten West, improving a lot this season. It is a deep division. I'm not sure how much improvements that Northwestern can make, but I can't wait to see. This is going to be a team that maybe could pull some upsets this season, but big improvements need to be made in Evanston, Illinois this season. No question about that.
Thanks for watching Big Ten TED, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten TED to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.